everybody, officially welcome. For those that don't know me, my name is 𝗬𝗨𝗡, CEO of 𝗬𝗨𝗘𝗦𝗧 and I'd like to just thank you for joining the webinar. It's always great to have you on board, and I know that your time's valuable. So this evening, the webinar is not going to be very long. We're going to try to limit the talk time to about 15-20 minutes, and then allow for some questions and wrap it up hopefully in about 40-45 minutes. I hope that you'll find the webinar informative, and you know, I hope also that you guys are doing well, safe and healthy, and especially it's great to have folks back in the water. So if you have been diving, that's great news. A couple of basic webinar house rules. You'll find that obviously you're muted and your video is turned off. That's just the webinar setting. If you have any sort of want to introduce yourself, as I said, use the chat box and tell us where you're from, and I'll also have a look to see if everybody can hear me fine. And also let us know what you're expecting from the webinar. And then for any questions, please make use of the Q&A box just to ensure that I don't lose any questions that you might have for 𝗬𝗍. And then as usual, the webinar replay will be available tomorrow via the Dan Southern Africa YouTube channel, but I'll also send a follow-up email with the link and a whole bunch of additional links for you to enjoy. So just a formal introduction to 𝗬𝗍𝗏. He's our guest speaker, and he's from the Dan Europe office. He's an expert diving and first aid instructor trainer, and he's also in charge of is the director of safety programs at the Dan Europe office. And he's also responsible for the development and implementation of Dan Europe safety initiatives. And in fact, tomorrow he's presenting to a whole bunch of students that have enrolled in a Dan Europe specific course to learn more about diving safety and so forth. He might give us a little bit of insight into that. It sort of speaks towards the HIRA program that Dan has developed over the years. And then in his spare time, he's a member of the Italian Red Cross Special Rescue Team and operates as a helicopter rescue swimmer diver medic on board the Italian State Police SAR helicopter. So this evening, 𝗬𝗍 will be talking about how to implement the COVID-19 risk mitigation steps when training first aid courses. So welcome, 𝗬𝗍, and thank you for making the time to speak to the Dan Southern Africa dive industry professionals and stakeholders. And with that, I'll hand over to you, 𝗬𝗍. Let me just stop sharing. All right, there we go.
All right. So thank you everybody for joining the webinar from this evening. I hope you can hear me well. I have some problems in understanding 𝗬𝗨𝗡, and I'm not sure if it's going to be resolved during this session. But let me start with the actual presentation of this evening. So if all is well, you are now looking at a slide on the screen. I can still see. All right. Okay. So tonight we'll talk about the COVID-19 management during Dan courses, or actually during first aid courses in general. It doesn't have to be particularly Dan Europe courses. It's the management can be applied to any kind of courses where we have to learn or teach first aid. So what will we see? What will we do this evening? We are going to ask ourselves what needs to be done if a person is in need of first aid. How should we act and react? The second thing that we look at is what does the Resuscitation Council actually have to say about first aid, BLSD, and CPR during this COVID-19 period. And then we will look at what the actual problem is and how we could organize a first aid course in these special times. So let's take a look at some of the options we have when a person needs first aid. Now, the first option is a very simple one. You just run away when a person hurts himself. You just escape, you go away, hide yourself, you don't want to help. Second option is you just stand by and wait until somebody else does something. And the third option is you actually assist, but you risk to get a COVID-19 infection. So if you look at these three options, they're not really all that fantastic. So I would like to introduce a fourth option, which is actually the one that I prefer. That's the one which is assist and manage all the risks. But how do we do that? So that's what we will see during this presentation. Now, guidelines. What do the current resuscitation guidelines actually say at the moment? Well, one of the first things, they've always said it, but this time they stress it, ensure that the rescuer, the victim, and all the other people on site are safe. Yeah, it's actually very easy to say, but how do we do it in practice? That might be a little bit more complicated. You need to ensure that all personal protection equipment is being worn and that the protective barriers are actually used during the courses and during first aid. You should evaluate consciousness by shaking or stimulating the victim without approaching the face. Here we see the first change in the guidelines where they try to avoid that our face gets too close to the victim's face. And then we should determine if the victim is breathing by simply observing chest movements. The rescuer's face should not come close to the victim's face. If the victim is unconscious and not breathing, then we should just call the EMS, describe the situation, and we start chest compressions without rescue breaths and ventilations. Now, here is the first thing that we really need to understand. We all know that COVID-wise, you can get infection because of these particles which we breathe out by talking, by blowing, by singing, by anything we do with our airways. So the guideline is very simple. They say, okay, you should not do mouth to mouth, because if you have an infection, you are going to infect the victim, which at that moment, let's say, actually is dead. But you don't know it yet. You still try to save his life. Or on the opposite, if the victim has an infection and you do mouth to mouth, you could get the infection as well because you have direct contact. This comes together with another thing, that when I'm pushing actually the chest of the victim, I have air movement as well coming out of the mouth, which means that I have the droplets that are able to come out of the airways as well. So the guidelines say, okay, guys, no mouth to mouth, and wear protection. But also the person who is not breathing should wear a mask. So actually you are required to put a mask on his face and then perform CPR. We will talk about this later when we go into the course section. The guidelines did not change what concerns the use of an AED. So using an AED you can still do in complete safety. It still says that you should continue rescue effort until the EMS arrives. But at the end, the guideline also explains to you that at the end of the rescue, you should take care of any possible infection, which means you need to dispose all the materials you used, make sure you disinfect it in the proper way. It's a little bit what we did also in the past, but it's just more stress to it, more attention to this. So what does it mean in terms of training? Well, the first thing that we've seen in the guidelines, but these are the BLS guidelines only, is that you no longer do mouth to mouth. So does this mean that we should no longer perform mouth to mouth in a course? Well, actually, the answer is yes. You should no longer teach the mouth to mouth in a BLS course. Now, this is not a decision that comes from us. This comes from the resuscitation councils. Obviously, practically, there is another solution. You can still teach mouth to mouth in a course, but this would mean that something would need to be done. We'll talk about that in a second. So what are we going to talk about now? We're going to talk about pre-course information, about the theoretical section, about the practical session, and about the end of the course. And I'm not going into specifics for any kind of first aid skill that we are teaching, with the exception at a certain moment when it comes to mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, because this most of the time is the most risky skill that we have at the moment. So when we talk about pre-course information, we need to understand how the clients and our students might consider joining a first aid course in a COVID-19 situation. They might be afraid to join. They might be afraid to getting infected. They say, no, I'll wait another 6 months. I'll wait another year before I do this course because, too many people in the classroom and the instructor might not be paying attention and I get sick at the end of the day. I don't want to do that. So what you need to do is you need to tell your students exactly how you are going to organize the course, how you're going to make sure that they are not going to be infected. So when do they have to come? How do they have to come? What do they need to wear? What do they need to bring? Do they need to bring masks? Okay. What kind of mask do you want them to bring? Do they need to bring eye protection, or are you going to take care of it? How is the course registration going to be done? Can it be done online? Maybe I send an email asking them fill it in and give it back on the day of the course. So it's not, there's no need to have to hassle around with papers and sending back and forward during the class itself. And how are people going to enter the course location? This might not be an issue if you have a course with 2 people, but imagine that you have a course with 15 people and they're all gonna enter the door at the same time. Then you have like a lot of people in a small area in a small in a minute of time, or in a half minute or 5 minutes of time. So then normally you need to make sure that not everybody enters the room and sits down at the same moment. People should need to enter the aula or the classroom one by one, so that there is as less as possible contamination possible, because the distance between persons are respected. And then there's a question that you must really ask yourself: how many students can you handle? Now, when I talked about how many students you can handle, then there are 2 questions in general. The first, how big is the classroom? Because if I need to make sure that there is a distance of 2 meters between each student, then my classroom is no longer good for 20 people, but I can only handle 10. And the second question is, how many materials do I have available? Now, imagine if you say, no, I know the guidelines, they say that you cannot do mouth-to-mouth, but I want to do it anyway. Well, this means that you would have 1 mannequin for every student. Well, if you have 2 students, that might be an option. But if you have 10 students, it would mean that you need 10 mannequins. Oh no, wait, I'll disinfect the mannequins. Okay, how? How are you going to disinfect the mannequin during a course? Oh, I have antiseptic wipes and I just wipe over the face. Yeah, but does that wipe actually kills the virus? No. So what are you gonna do? Oh, I'll take bleach and I put it in a bucket and I'll do it there. Okay, what are you going to put in the bleach? Only the face? Only the mouthpiece? Remember that when you inflate a mannequin, air will not only touch the skin, the outer skin of the mannequin, it will go to the internal mechanism, it will go into the lung bag, which means that you would need to change that system or disinfect the system. The lung bag obviously have to be changed every time between each student. Now imagine if you have 2 mannequins and you have 10 students. That's going to be a very long course if you're going to have to disinfect between each student. So that is something that you should consider when you want to know how many students you actually can handle. Knowledge development. Well, that's easy, you know. We need to teach people the theoretical part of the course. We can do that online, which is absolutely great. You know, no contact possibilities. You have more than 2 meters of distance, and the only droplet that can come out of your mouth will actually end up on your computer screen. So this is absolutely very safe, but this is not always an option. So people still might need to teach first aid courses in a classroom setting. If this is the case, then you should evaluate the classroom. How should you organize your course in a classroom? There's no ready-to-use answer because it depends on classroom to classroom. But the general COVID-19 prevention rules apply there as well. And you need to tell your students what are the rules that they have to apply in the classroom. And this might sound very like basic, but how do they have to go to the toilet? And how and where do they need to go and wash their hands? And not all at the same time. And are there any breaks? And if there are any breaks, how are you going to organize it to avoid 10 people taking a coffee at the same moment? You're going to need to make sure that you have enough masks available for your students. Maybe the student gets to the classroom, he forgot a mask, or maybe one of the masks, the elastic breaks. So you need to have some extras. You need to make sure you have baskets for waste and personal protection equipment. You need to make sure that you have enough distance between the students. that there is enough distance between yourself and the students. And if you have assistants, try to avoid them running around the classroom the whole time. And again here, administration, how is that done? But the best thing, send it by email, having it bring to the classroom. When we go to knowledge development, we still are in knowledge development, we need to talk also a bit about respiratory hygiene and the use of personal protection equipment. Now, we know we've seen it probably lots of times on television, we read it on the websites, and we think everybody knows. But I think it is important for you just to remind your students in the beginning of the class, what is this respiratory hygiene and how do you use the personal protection equipment? And make them understand the difference between the several kinds of masks, because it's not very clear to everybody. People are still using the wrong masks today. I can see people in shops that wearing the real cool FFP2 masks, but they have a valve inside, so they protect themselves, but they're not protecting the clients that come into the classroom, into the shop. So the same on the classroom. You may need to make sure that people know how to use their personal protection equipment. Also make sure there is an air exchange. Open a window if possible to make sure fresh air comes in. As I said before, how you organize the breaks, and make sure that you have a good classroom preparation and the gloves available for your students. Now, gloves is a difficult issue because a glove is protecting our hands. But if we have a virus on the glove and then with that same glove, my nose is itchy and I'm going to touch my nose, or I'm going to put my finger in my mouth, then the glove will give you zero protection. Hand washing is extremely important, so we need to stress it to the students. Make sure that you wash your hands before and after the training sessions. Of course, we also need to offer them the use of alcohol or gel. And we all know that it's more that the primary thing is washing hands, and alcohol and gel should be a secondary solution. But make sure that you have dispensers and you have gel available during the course. Now, this is a simple example of how a course can be organized. You see here that people are listening to a lecturer during the theoretical session. There is a 2-meter distance between everybody. There even is a 3-meter distance between the instructor or the screen and the students, a lot of distance. I prefer as an instructor not to wear a mask. Is this an option? Well, it is an option if the distance is big, because maybe with a mask students can't understand you. So if your distance between yourself and the student is more than enough, then you can consider removing your mask when you talk, when you teach the class. For the rest, I would absolutely recommend to wear a mask. Then you can see that at the left side of the slide, there is the entrance, there is alcohol and alcoholic solution or gel close to the entrance, and then we have some waste baskets available to throw away personal protection equipment and normal waste. So what about skill development? Now, skill development gets a little bit more difficult because we cannot do that online. So we still need to respect the interpersonal distance of at least 2 meters. So this means that we're going to have to work in training stations. And again, here, this means your classroom needs to be big enough to make sure that the distance is assured. Now, what you also would like to do is especially when you teach with different instructors, that you don't change instructors from one group to the other. You have your students with that instructor, and then another students have another instructor has other students, and you keep those groups. Try to avoid swapping people between groups, and try to avoid instructors or assistants walking around all the times. Should you use chairs and tables? Well, of course you can use chairs and tables. You just need to make sure that the table gets infected before and after its use. And what about the masks? Well, you're going to have a distance which is much shorter than in a theoretical part. So the mask you should wear, at least the students should have a surgical mask, and you as an instructor should have a KN95 or an FFP2 mask for sure. And what about the gloves? Well, I mentioned the gloves before. You should have them, but stress to the students, that they know exactly what the glove will protect and what the glove is not protecting. Now, mask-wise, I would like to just give like a 30 seconds something about masks because it's too important. I've mentioned it before, the masks with the filters. Now, when you are doing the practical session and you are going to do CPR on a mannequin, remember that should you not wear a mask, your droplets will fall on the mannequin. And even if you're not performing CPR, if you are not protected, if you don't wear a mask. So now the droplets are on the mannequin. There's going to be another student coming in now. He's going to touch the mannequin. Now the droplets might be on his hands. So don't think, okay, it's only a mannequin, I can't infect the mannequin, that you shouldn't be careful, because the same mannequin will be used by other students later. So how do you need to set up these stations? What should they be made of? It's a good recommendation to have a clean mat to put the equipment for the type of course that you are teaching. So this might be a full or a half bust mannequin, an AD trainer, scissors, razors, anything that is needed to teach the course, an oxygen unit, whatever. You need to make sure that every station has these disposable gloves and spare surgical masks. And you need to make sure that your students wear the masks before they start. Not that they go to the mannequin without protection and then you're handing it to them. No, no. Before the start of the course, they need to wear this protection. And also make sure that hydroalcoholic or gel dispensers are available at those stations, so that people don't have to walk to the other side of the class or have to pass by another group to get to the alcohol. Remember that equipment used during courses might be a vehicle for indirect transmission of infection, and to minimize the risk of contamination, equipment must be cleaned, sanitized at the end of every student session, after the instructor demonstration, and again at the end of the course before storing it. So, is it allowed that I use a mannequin for the whole course without disinfecting it, even if I am not, for example, doing mouth-to-mouth? Well, the answer is no. It is recommended that you clean all the materials that you are using during the course. Obviously, for the mannequin, if we wear gloves and we wear protection on the mouth, then it shouldn't be that much of an issue. But if that same mannequin is used in a first aid course and students are going to have bandaging their head or the stomach or whatever, then you need to take in consideration to clean the masks between every student. And this is an example of how a classroom can look like. Obviously, as I said, it is an example, but you can see that there is the distance of 2 meters between every person. There is a mannequin on the floor. There is an instructor next to the mannequin demonstrating the skill, and the second group is at a safe distance. You can see there that there is a table with materials for each group, and that there are gel and alcoholic dispensers available for each group, so people have completely autonomous. Now you see that there is a person lying on the floor, which is the mannequin, but sometimes you can't use a mannequin. For example, if you have a half body mannequin, if you are doing the recovery position, for example, then you would need to put a mannequin on his side. And if it's a half body mannequin, it's not going to work. So maybe you need an assistant. And if you need an assistant, you should use that assistant for the whole course. And this assistant should wear the needed protection because students will be touching this person. The last part on the mandatory personal protection equipment. So remember that surgical masks and disposable gloves for all students should be provided. Surgical masks are superior, and I said FFP2 without valves before are available. Disposable gloves, goggles or visors, and a gown or other disposable water-repellent clothing for an instructor and assistant instructors if present. Now you say, man, what is the guy gonna wear? Well, it depends on the course, but if he's on the floor and everybody's gonna touch him, you need to make sure that he's protected. And again, every time gloves are removed, make sure that people wash their hands, even if they were wearing gloves. And if not possible to wash hands, at least they're going to need to use alcohol or gel. So at the end of the course, it's time to hand over the certificates, and everybody wants to make the selfie or the picture for Facebook, and the mask doesn't look good on Facebook. So now the whole course we've been very careful about the distance between two persons. Now the course is finished, and now everybody is just hanging on the one person on the other without a mask, with all the certificates, and everybody's shouting, "Oh, that's so fantastic!" Now you look like a complete jerk, because the whole course you've been careful, and now you get to the end of the course and nobody wears a mask. And if you think that I'm saying is stupid, just go on Facebook and see how people organize courses. You can see that during the course they have a mask, and at the end they're all together without a mask. So something went wrong. Make sure you open the windows to ensure proper air exchange. It might not be possible, obviously, to keep them open throughout the lesson, but make sure if there's a possibility to open them. Then wait until everybody left the classroom before returning the equipment to its appropriate containers, just to avoid moving these materials which might be infected. So make sure that you clean and sanitize it after the course when nobody is there anymore, and make sure you seal the bags for the waste and the personal protection equipment, and just discard them according to the local regulation. So now, at the end, I try to keep it as short as possible. What about the typical skills that we are doing during first aid courses? Well, I've mentioned recovery position before. So if you have to put a person on his side, you're going to have to touch him. You cannot do this with a half body. You need to the legs need to be placed in a certain position. The arms need to be placed in a certain position. The head needs to be open. You can't do that with a normal CPR mannequin. So you're going to use an assistance for it. The assistants need to be protected, as said before, or you find a mannequin which makes it possible to use to teach a recovery position. These mannequins, they exist. They doesn't cost that much. Well, it doesn't cost that much. I mean, they'll cost the same as a half body mannequin, so it's not that they're cheap, but it's about $200 to $250 or euros for such a mannequin. But they would avoid contact between an assistant and a student. The 4-inch body airway obstruction skill. The forward body airway obstruction skill is another skill that you need to consider how to organize it. Maybe some of you know the 𝗧𝗢𝗣𝗜 vest, which is a specific trainer vest. You put it on a person. I can wear it, and a student now comes to stand behind me, and he just does the Heimlich maneuver, for example. But if we do this in a classroom setting now, then the distance between the student and the instructor, or the student and another student, is going to be too short. We are touching him. We are breathing in his neck, actually. So we recommend to use the 𝗧𝗢𝗣𝗜 on a mannequin, or to use a mannequin for this skill. You can put it on a table and you can learn the skills, but just to avoid that we are breathing into the neck of somebody else. So use a mannequin doing this skill. Demand valve skill, and we can discuss this later if there is time, but how are you going to do the demand valve skill? If you remember the demand valve skill, I need to breathe in to check the demand valve, okay? And I should not breathe out into the demand valve. That's what we've learned in oxygen courses. But from the moment I'm breathing in from the demand valve, I can no longer put it on the face of the student, because I had it on my face anyway. And if the student is going to use it and on another provider who's on the floor, then the regulator will be infected, possible infected. You don't know. I'm not saying that every student in your class has COVID-19, but we don't know. So we can't teach the demand valve skill on a person anymore. We need to use a mannequin also for this. And then when it comes to bandaging skills, without going into detail for all the different kind of skills that we might have for bandaging, we might have bandaging an eye. Use a mannequin when you have to bandage an eye. Bandaging a leg. I can bandage a leg and still have more than 2 meter distance or 1.5 meter distance between the head of the victim and the head of the instructor or the other students. You're not gonna have to do bandaging on the arm, because now you are too close to the other person's face. But you just be a little bit of inventive. You know, it's possible, but use your head when doing these skills. If you said we can discuss that later in a bit more in depth, but I'm already over time. So I'd like to thank you for now, until now, for your attention. I will take away the screen.
All right.
I think that should have done it. Not sure. I can't really see what's happening.
All right.
Yep.
Just give it a moment. I'm sure it'll come back. Well, I mean, that's, you know, Tom Cross, one of the Dan instructors here in South Africa, said lots to think about, some things you don't think about, and so forth. You'll see, I'll read out Carl van der Kolff. He's down in Cape Town, also one of the Dan instructors in South Africa. Has got a couple of comments for you, and he's also, you know, sent me some messages just saying that, you know, it is quite tough. You know, I guess we are in this habit of doing things the way we do it. And now we got COVID, and we've also now got first aid skills, and, you know, it just doesn't come naturally. So it's, I guess it's right. You know, we have to kind of just take it easy and, you know, think about what we're going to do before either presenting the skill or delivering it. So, yeah. Don't know if you can hear me yet. Seems like
I can hear you.
Oh, okay, fantastic. So, yeah, Guy, I'll start off. There's a question from Carl van der Kolff. He said he had a course yesterday for a group of 4 flight center staff. So people at a call center, obviously. At the, he says, at the end, 20 pair of gloves in a bucket. Really heart-sore to have so many plastic waste, plus the alcohol wipes and the packets after each use. With students, you know, basically a lot of waste with trying to ensure that COVID measures are taking place. You know, what's your response to that?
Yeah, well, he makes a very good point. You know, in COVID-19, we created a huge amount of waste. Imagine the amount of masks that are thrown away and the amount of gloves that are thrown away. So that's also why I said before, glove-wise, one should need to understand what the glove actually does. The glove is only protecting my hands, because if I'm touching an infected person or an infected material with my glove, and then with my glove I'm doing, I don't know if you can see it, I'm touching my mouth or my nose, I haven't resolved anything. So I wouldn't change actually the glove between every skill. I would surely do the theoretical part first and then the whole practical part, but I would kind of ask my students if they could keep the glove on all the time, just to avoid that we are creating for one student maybe 5 pairs of gloves, because after every skill he's changing gloves. That would be a waste. But the gloves, yeah, well, personally, their protection is very limited, but it should not be ignored. We should keep them. Wipes, yeah, wipes, that's another problem, but wipes are not even good enough to disinfect the most of the materials. So it's good for fast disinfection, but there are other products on the market that we may need to consider using now, like normal household disinfectants. They are for equipment, they are fine. So you can spray them on some of the materials and use them. Obviously, when it comes to a mannequin, and when there is no mouth-to-mouth contact, as I said before, the risk of contamination in the lungs and the internal mechanism is very low. But there still is a possibility that there is a small risk of contamination. If everybody wears a mask, it shouldn't be the case, because it should be quite pretty straightforward. But maybe wipes are not the best solution in this moment. Maybe you should consider a spray, and not that you use also at home to disinfect some materials. And then if you are using a mannequin for each person, then you obviously need to disinfect only the mannequin at the end of the course. But I don't think instructors will have one mannequin for each student all over. It may seem weird, but in Holland this is a request. In Holland they do not allow that courses are taught without mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. But you need to make sure that every student had his own mannequin, or that you have to disinfect the mannequins between students.
Yeah, maybe you should keep that one quiet. You know, we've had quite a strict lockdown in South Africa, so we don't want to give our government any additional kind of requirements they want to push onto us. But yeah. Guy, Russell
got it out in the video.
Okay, so Russell Opland was asking about a bag valve mask. Is this still okay? How would you manage that? And is that possibly, just from my side, maybe, you know, obviously that's a skill that's taught in, say, the oxygen course and basic life support and so forth. Oh, you can't hear. Yeah, I don't know. Can you see the Q&A?
Let me try to remove the video.
Okay. Guy, can you hear me better now?
Okay, Morne.
Yeah.
It's a little bit better, yes.
I'll stop my video too. So is that better, Guy?
Yes, it's better.
Okay. So Russell Opland was asking about the use of a bag valve mask. Is this still okay? And maybe any considerations to consider when teaching and using this?
Oh, yes. That's an excellent question. I'm gonna have to activate my video again to give the answer. So sorry, guys. Here I am. So when we talk about the bag valve mask, and if you use it on a mannequin, then it's fine, because you are taking air from the ambient, you put it in the mannequin, and it comes out of the mannequin, and it's the same air that went in. There is no infection. But when you are using it on a real person, then you squeeze the BVM, air goes through the valve into the mouth and to the lungs of the injured person. Now air comes out again and we leave the BVM through another one-way valve, which means that actually the exhaled air is still going in the surrounding where you are. So if you don't wear a mask, the exhaled air coming out of the BVM could be contaminated if the victim had a COVID-19 contamination. So if you use the BVM, you should wear a mask, absolutely, because you're not going to have the best protection. And again, here we have to talk about masks. If you're using a BVM and you're wearing a surgical mask, what does the surgical mask do? It protects another person. It doesn't protect you. So now when you have a person with COVID-19, you are using a BVM, contaminated air comes out, you are wearing a normal surgical mask, you are not protected. Unless, and I have to open it, don't know if you can see it. Is this, can you see it?
Yes.
Well, this is a filter, a bacterial filter. And this actually can be attached to the BVM. And if you attach this to the BVM, the air that comes out of the BVM will be filtered as using a normal face mask. So if you're going to use a BVM in a classroom session, this could be a good idea, just a recommendation. But if you're going to use a BVM in the real emergency, then you would need to have this little filter. I don't know if you can see it very well. This little filter. Or obviously, you make sure that you wear FFP2 masks, because contaminated air can still come out of the BVM.
Okay. So great answer there, Guy. Fantastic. Not so much a question, but more some ingenuity from Carl down in Cape Town, you know, dealing with how to bandage and do splinting and stuff. So what he's done is he's taken a mannequin and he's put what we refer to as a onesie, or I guess maybe pajamas, or, you know, some type of clothing, and he's filled the legs and the arms with newspaper, and then, you know, to mimic legs and arms, and then do bandaging on that. using the mannequin and you know, avoiding that close contact, say, with the rest of the students. So yeah, I think that's quite a nice idea. Maybe Carl, it'd be great if you can share some pictures of that. It'd be nice to possibly share that with other folks. I don't know if you've come across something like that, Guy. So instead of buying the upgraded version of the mannequins, is to sort of adapt your current one that you have using some, you know, old clothing and general household, you know, papers and things like that as stuffing.
Yeah, well, it's a good idea. There's nothing wrong with the idea. I like it a lot, and it's actually the same as the mannequin I mentioned before. There is a mannequin which is called 𝗧𝗔𝗟𝗞. This is a relatively new mannequin that comes from a German company. In Europe, it's sold through a German company, and this is actually a mannequin that you have to fill with newspaper or with other clothes or whatever you can find, and you can use it for bandaging as well. But you can make it yourself as well, of course.
Sure. All right, so I got another question from Russell, and it's got to do with the lateral position. You know, so he's asking if everybody's wearing gloves and I assume masks, etc. Is it still okay to use people instead of a mannequin, Guy?
Yeah, well, yes, that's an option. You can still consider it. Now, personally, I would recommend you not to use another student as the victim, but I would recommend to use an assistant as a victim, and to make sure that this assistant wears more protection, wears eye protection, and maybe he wears I wouldn't say a coverall, but you have those kind of paper protection equipment for your clothing, and I don't know the name in English at the moment. Gowns, I think it's called.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
So so the contact would only be between a student and always the same assistant, or you as an instructor, you're going to be the person on the floor and they can do whatever you want with them. But I would recommend that in that case you wear more protection. Everybody's gonna be touching you.
Yes, okay. Another question from Russell Guy, and he's saying he wants to know standard alcohol swabs, are they adequate to disinfect between students? Well,
it depends what the standard swab contains, because in COVID-19 the recommendation of the World Health Organization is that the alcohol should be a concentration of at least, I believe, 65 or 70% alcohol, and your contact time should be, and I have to look it up because there's too many different things. I think like 10-second contact time or 20 seconds contact time, which means that the surface need to be wet for that amount of time. Now, I know a lot of the alcohol wipes that are existing on the market, they do not contain 70% of alcohol, and they are not even, well, if I use them for 20 seconds, they're already dry. So it depends from the kind of alcohol wipe that you would have. Yes, okay. Yeah, I guess maybe looking at some of the sprays that you're talking about and using that in some form or way. All right. So thanks for that, Guy. We've got another question again from Russell. Quite a nice one, interesting one. And Russell, just to let you know, you reached out to me earlier about certifications and things like that. As I said, I'll share a link to sort of an online course that's available via the Dan e-learning platform. And what I've done is used a lot of the materials that Guy and his team have put together. So you can work through that, and you'll also find this the answer to this question, but I'm going to allow Guy to answer it. Guy, Russell wants to know how to use a mannequin to test the demand valve functioning. So, you know, there's a nice question for you to, especially with the oxygen skill. If I understand correctly, is how to test the demand valve? Correct, yeah, using a mannequin. Yeah, okay. Now, obviously, the mannequin is going to be the victim. And you as a student, you should test the demand valve because you do the demo breathing. You should not be breathing from the demand valve. There should be no contact. So you just act as if you are breathing. just to show your students, listen, this is what needs to be done. And your students going to need to show you as well that they act as if they are breathing from the demand valve without actually doing it. Yeah. But it's true. From the moment you put the valve on the face of a mannequin, the valve would not be activated. Correct. So you would not see the condensation on the mask. You should say this to your student. Listen, guys, normally there is condensation on the mask. Yeah. Another thing that you should say is that using it is not a demand valve, but it's very closely, it's still from the same course, is the non-rebreather mask. Mm. You need to put 15 liter flow, but the mask will always be inflated. So you need to explain the emission. Normally the back disinflates and everything. Yeah. Now, if you want, I'm gonna need to see. I'm not gonna promise something that I can't really make possible, but I believe that we have videos for every skill. So you might even show these videos to your students to show them how the valves and the masks normally work. Yeah.
So Guy, one of the things I remember as I was working through the COVID and first aid guide that you put together is that obviously these are recommendations from the resuscitation councils, and from a DAN perspective, we just putting those into our training programs. But I also recall that where there are limitations in actually providing the full skill as we normally would do is to sort of have these workarounds as you recommended. But then once COVID activities lift, is to then try get your group of people back together and then run through the proper skill delivery. Is that still the case?
Depends a bit from what course and what skills you would be doing, but surely if in COVID-19 area the guideline is not to do mouth to mouth, and it's recommended to do a course without actually performing mouth to mouth. You can show to the student maybe one of the mannequins, but the students will not be able to do it. Yeah. It would be a good idea to have that group coming back. But it depends, it's a difficult question because imagine if the people they live close to you, they don't have a problem in coming back to you for another, for a beer and then for a resuscitation skill. But if these people have to travel like 200 kilometers to get to you, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get people back together. But it surely is recommended to have them back, because they would not have performed mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, which is a very important part of the skill. Correct. Because it doesn't really make much sense for me to do CPR without mouth-to-mouth. Yes. So I would say, yes, for this skill, I would absolutely say get back together and we'll do this CPR skill with resuscitation in a second moment. Yeah. But if it's a first aid course, then maybe you can do everything on mannequins and there's no need to come back. The same for the oxygen provider course. I mean, if it's nicer that you see the valve opening and the condensation, but even if the student didn't see it, he will know what to do. So maybe there's no need to get him back into the classroom. Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, it seems like COVID continues to provide us with challenges. So Guy, I got another couple of questions again. Russell, he wants to know, what about face masks with one-way valves for rescue breaths? I know you touched on it a little bit during your presentation. Do you have anything to add to that? With pocket, do you mean with pocket masks? Yes, I would assume if it's got a one-way valve, then yeah, must be the general pocket mask or oronasal resuscitation mask. Okay, now exactly, the oronasal resuscitation mask, which includes also other brands. So that is not a protection against COVID-19. The issue is that COVID-19 is a bit of a problematic disease, let's say, and it would not give you the needed protection. The filter inside the oronasal resuscitation mask is not going to block the virus, and the one-way valve is actually only avoiding that the exhaled air is going back into the mask, but doesn't give you much of a protection.
Okay.
And you have different brands as well. Not every pocket mask is the same, but there is no pocket mask that actually have an approved filter against COVID-19.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you for that, Russell. I hope that answers your question. Coral, I see your question. I think it's more to do with, either how to order a bag valve mask or something like that. You can just send me a message privately via WhatsApp, email, or give me a call, and, I'll sort you out on that end. Carl's got another great question, and it's got to do with oxygen, and especially the oxygen course, Guy. So what Carl said is, what he's doing nowadays, and it's pretty much in the course or the recommendations that you've also provided, is to rather, open the oxygen unit, show folks how it works and all this, but he's very concerned about, a lot of these alcohol rubs and sprays, and now you're also working with oxygen. How does one work around that to ensure safety and not an accident from happening?
Yeah, that's a concern. That's I don't know if you, for those who read the guidelines for dive operations, it's the same concern there. Yeah. Oxygen in alcohol is not something that we really would like to see. It is a problem, but we need to be realistic. When you are teaching the course, it depends obviously how many masks and pocket masks or nasal masks you have. I would personally have a mask or a nasal restoration mask for every student, so I only have to clean at the end of the course, and the same for the maybe other masks. But if you have a true fit mask, you can use alcohol and it dries in a really short time. It doesn't keep wet. So that's not my biggest concern.
Yeah, I guess it's also, handling the regulator and the cylinder valve and all those kind of jazz. But yeah, I guess as far as I remember, is that you assemble it and you don't disassemble it as often, or you put it together and that's it, as opposed to where we always assemble, disassemble. So once again, you most probably don't build up that muscle memory as you used to do in the past, but there are other more pressing concerns in the form of COVID and the alcohol, and so alcohol-based disinfectants to take into consideration.
Yeah, exactly. We have a document that talks specifically about oxygen courses. I guess you're gonna share this with the group as well, because then they have a full view of what's in the document, because it's a big document. So and that will answer all these questions actually.
Yes, no, absolutely. I will share. It's in that e-learning platform or course that I created that's available via the Dan e-learning platform, and I've added all the guides and supporting documents and things that Guy and his team put together. I've got another 2 questions basically, Guy. Another one from Russell. He wants to know, maybe it's a little bit beyond the scope of this presentation, but for scuba rescue or unconscious diver skills, he wants to know, are you now saying that no rescue breaths in water? Do we just get them out the water as fast as possible? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I have to answer these questions in 2 parts. The first part is you should ask your dive agency, because this is a skill which is connected to certification of, for example, a rescue diver. So your dive organization would need to tell you if that skill is going to change or not. And I believe that some organizations already have communicated this to the instructors, how that skill should be done. Now, from my point of view, you should not do rescue breaths in water. Because you're not protected. You can't even. There's no way you cannot protect a person. First of all, rescue breaths in water, even in normal conditions, are already difficult. It's gonna be now next to the normal difficulty. You're gonna have the risk, the possibility of the risk of infection. So no, I would not do that skill.
Okay. So Russell, I hope that answers your question. Again, Guy, and for the folks on the webinar, these are challenges, you know, and I can see a comment from Andre Nadir. He says, you know, thanks a lot of practicism, things to think about, common sense we need to look at, and then, you know, obviously make sure that we stay safe, you know. So, and a lot of thank yous, and Russell has commented on all the feedback you've given him to say thank you, great feedback on the pocket mask and all the other information you've shared. Last question, unless anybody else wants to add a couple more, you're more than welcome to do that. But Carl wants to know, you know, where his question was those filters that you showed for the bag valve mask. Do we have them? I don't have them in stock, but I'm busy placing an order or busy finalizing a product order with Dan Europe and Guy and his team, so I could maybe just ask him if they do have any available, maybe to add some to the order, and we can have them in stock. So yeah, I'll let you know if that's possible.
Okay. Now I can answer him. We don't have them. We don't sell them.
Oh, okay.
I can give you the name of the filter. You know, this is funny. The filter is called IsoGuard filter, and the company is 𝗧𝗢𝗣𝗜𝗖. And this is a filter that they are using in hospitals. Now, this filter normally costs less than €1. I said normally, because in COVID-19, it now costs like €5.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I have seen similar kind of units around that one can purchase around South Africa. So I'll also have a look into that and share the information I get, Guy, and you can tell us if, or at least let me know if that works. And if it does, then, you know, I'll pass that information on to the folks that have been on the webinar and some other folks around. So Guy, I can't see any further questions. Just see, you know, all the folks saying thank you. It's been a, you know, great feedback, lots to think about. From my side, you know, as always, it's great to have you present to folks your knowledge and, you know, just all the skills that you have is great. And it's nice that you're willing to share that with us. So thank you for that. For all the folks that have attended the webinar, I can see everybody is still stuck around. Thank you so much. I hope you found it informative. Last chance, if you still have a question for Guy, pop it into that Q&A box. Guy, before I say goodbye, anything from your, or sort of parting thoughts from your side that you'd like to share with the group that's online?
No, I just would like to thank everybody for being here and for their interest. I'm looking at the names. I can see some old friends that I met a few years ago that I trained when I was in South Africa. So a big hug to you. And it's always nice to be here, Morne. You're doing an absolutely great job, and you can invite me anytime you want.
No problems. I'll make a plan now. We'll just wait for the COVID travel restrictions to ease up a little bit more, especially on the international side of things. So yeah, Guy, thank you very much. Just a reminder for all the folks that attended. I will send a follow-up email tomorrow, and it'll include obviously the webinar replay link. So if you'd like to go back and listen to what was discussed, you'll be able to do that. And then obviously I'll add, as usual, add a whole bunch of Dan freebies, links. The most important one will be the link to this COVID-19 first aid recommendation course. So you can complete that, do that, and you'll have access to all the guides and manuals and stuff that Guy was referring to. And then the usual kind of links to some of the HIRA programs that I've put online, the boat safety, air safety, and so forth, as well as all the alert divers, the annual reports, and so forth. You know, so if there's anything else you need, you can just reach out to me. Yeah, that'll be great. For the folks that are still online, I can, you know, from just looking at the names, you're all Dan members, but if you're not, or if you know folks that aren't, please always recommend us to them. And if they're not sure where to find us, you can just refer them to the Dan website or the Dan Southern Africa website, which is www.dansa.org. For those folks, obviously most of you are, or all of you are, thank you for your support as always, and thank you for being Dan instructors. For those that aren't, if you're keen, reach out to me and we can make a plan to get you on board. And yeah, that brings me to the end of the webinar. Thank you so much, Guy. Thank you so much for everybody that attended. Enjoy the rest of the evening and see you in a future webinar. Thank you so much. Good night.